The biggest benefit to using a package like this is that you don't have to automate on top of the Salesforce UI. You can automate directly using the Salesforce API leveraged by this package. So you don't have to understand the API, you don't have to understand how it works, you just have to understand how to use this Salesforce package in Automation Anywhere A2019. I'm Micah Smith, and this is Bot Store Breakdowns. So in this session, we're going to be taking a look at the Salesforce package, and we're going to try to understand how we can get it set up, how we can actually use this package, and what it's actually capable of. So first off, we're looking at Bot Store right now. This is botstore.automationanywhere.com. And from here, I just found the Salesforce package. This is the one we're going to be reviewing. Now, a couple things I want to point out here. So this is the Bot Store listing. On the right-hand side here, we can see that there is a README that's available. I'll open that up in a new tab here. So there's, basic documentation, so you can go through it if you want to, learn how to actually use this. There's also some helpful examples as far as getting it set up with a connected app in Salesforce, so you might want to follow that. The other thing I'll point out here, obviously we have a couple screenshots talking about what the bot is actually capable of. The big thing here though is that we also have the GitHub link to this. So if I open this up, we should see this is all of the code for this particular package. So if you wanted to customize it, if you want to see how it works, if you want to understand how to build your own packages, this is a really helpful way to learn how to do that. So you can come here, you can clone this, you can then branch, you can make any changes you want to. You don't have to check it back in if you don't want. But this is a great way to understand how packages like this work and get your hands on it. And you can customize it and make changes and add extra actions if you want to. So I just wanted to point that out. The next thing we want to look at is exactly how we get this set up on our control room. So you'll hit Get Bot if you haven't gotten the bot before, and it will show you this like download link. So for me, it's showing download because I've already clicked it before. But if you just click it for the first time, it will say, hey, are you sure you want to get this? It's free. So yeah, you just say yes. From here, you can enter your control room URL. And when you do that, it's just going to take you to the actual control room page where you can do the installation. For me, I already have my control room open, so I'm not even going to worry about this. I'll just hit the X here. If I come over to my control room, right? So this is the same account. Or this is my control room. I'll say that, right? I don't want to get into the account stuff right now. If I click on Bot Store, this is where I enter my account. And this account has to match the account credentials that I just filled in to sign into Bot Store. So whatever you use there, that's what you want to use here, okay? This is not like your local Automation Anywhere Enterprise A2019 Cloud login. This is your login that you use for Bot Store. So I'm going to put mine in real quick. I have to stop talking when I type because otherwise it's going to be a wreck when I'm entering passwords. So I can come here. I should be able to find. So this is basically a list of all of the bots or packages that I've acquired from Bot Store. The Salesforce one for me was right here. So I'm going to come down. It says it's already installed. I'm going to install it again just so we can see this process. But you'll come here. You'll mouse over on the. This is called a kebab menu. And then you'll click the Add to My Bots and hit Yes, Continue. Okay, so it's going to install this onto your private directory. Now, if you have something of that exact same name or you have this installed previously, it's going to overwrite that. So just keep that in mind. Let's go now back over to Bots. And I'll go to My Bots. And here I have my private directory. So with my private directory, right, I have two kind of core folders. I have my bots directory, which is where, if I'm creating a new bot, this is likely where it's going to go. I also have my bot store directory. So this is designated for stuff that either I'm building that I want to submit to Bot Store or stuff that I have downloaded from Bot Store. It should install right here. So I'm going to scroll down here. I will find the Salesforce package -Automation Anywhere. Again, not always this is the case, but they should be named based off of the name of the package itself or the name of the bot, then a dash, and then the name of the vendor who created it. So Automation Anywhere created this particular package. That's why it's named accordingly. All right, so with this bot, the only thing that was really included was this particular sample bot. And this sample bot just shows you how the bot can actually be used. Going back here real quick, we'll also see that this package that we installed from BotStore also installed the package itself. So if I scroll down here to all of my packages, I should see that the Salesforce package was just installed. And so I can see that I can set a default version if there's not one that's set, or if I have multiple versions of this. You shouldn't really have to worry about that, but you also can come down here and see exactly what actions the package includes. Okay, so let's step back. Let's go back to the bot itself that we were just looking at. So this is the bot that you get from BotStore, right? And this is the default bot that comes with it. And it's really just designed to let you test out these different actions and let you try to see if you can get them all to work and show you examples of how they might be used. So the first part I want to call out here is that this is really just the bot shell at the top, right? So it's collecting like the bot name and vendor name details. It's setting up some logging locations. It's clearing out some old logs to do log management. So these top 3 steps here, I'm minimizing them because you really don't have to have them open, okay? They're just there because they're part of that bot shell. If you're not familiar with what a bot shell is, we have some other videos on YouTube to explain that a little bit better. But think of a bot shell basically as just a template that I would build bots on. So the real logic for this bot is inside of the try block here. So if we come inside here, notice this comment says all the bot logic goes inside here. So everything outside of this is really just standard for our bot. It's part of that bot shell or that template. The first thing we want to do for our bot is connect to a Salesforce environment. So this is where we do our authentication. This is where we set up our session. If we go back to the documentation here, the way that we do that is we have to have a connected app that's been set up in Salesforce. So the instructions here walk you through exactly how that's done. But you would basically set up a connected app within Salesforce. You set the permissions for that and enable OAuth. And when you do that, you're going to get a couple values. You're going to get the consumer key and the consumer secret. Those 2 values you want to copy because that's how I'm going to authenticate to that particular connected app in Salesforce. Okay, I'll need that. I'll need my Salesforce URL, and I'll also need my username and password that I use to authenticate to Salesforce. Okay, so we're going to use that here in a second. The other thing I'll point out is if you're doing development and you've got some people in different geographic regions that are going to be using this same connected app, you'll want to do the IP relaxation. And this is all on Salesforce stuff, right? So you'll have to do this kind of stuff on the Salesforce side. But if you find that, user A and user B are not having the same experience and sometimes they're not able to actually use this package or not able to authenticate on Salesforce, check out the relax IP restrictions on your connected app. So with all of that set up, right, and if you need help with that, you can talk to your Salesforce administrator. The idea would be that you could put in your base URL, your client ID, your client secret, right, for those 2 values that we just looked at. Client key and client ID are the same, and then consumer secret and consumer ID or client secret, those all mean the same thing. You can fill in these values as insecure strings, or you can pull them from the credential vault. And that's what we're going to do for right now. This is what I would suggest you do. So if I go to Micah's Locker, go to Salesforce DevX, I have my login URL. That's what I called it. For my client ID, again, I'm going to go pick that from the credential vault. The URL itself probably isn't something that you have to have in the vault. It's just easy to keep them all together. Stuff like the client ID and client secret, you for sure want to keep those protected. And that's why I would put those in your vault, just to make sure that, should someone get a hold of it, you don't want them to authenticate against your connected app when they're not supposed to be. All right, last 2 values here are my username, we'll hit confirm, and my password. And again, this is my Salesforce username and Salesforce password. So not to be confused with what I'm doing on Automation Anywhere. So I fill those values in and it will return to me an auth token. And that auth token is not actually needed for me as far as a bot builder. It's what the session will be using, right? So I have a session that's been set up. It's what the session will be using as I try to do these other actions. So speaking of actions, let's go down here and take a look at the Salesforce package itself. We've got five actions included here. We've got authenticate, which is what we're doing right now, right? The very first step you have to do, which will set up that session for you. I've got delete object, which allows me to delete standard objects or custom objects in my Salesforce environment. So if I have, let's say, a location and I need to delete that location, I could select that as the object type, give the object ID, and I could delete that. I can execute SOQL. And SOQL is the, what is it called? Salesforce Object Query Language is what they call that. And it's basically like SQL, right? It looks like SQL, except I'm querying Salesforce objects. And so I could find cases, or I could find users, or I could find accounts. And I could pull back the corresponding values. And that could be custom values, or that could be default object values. And both of those work. The other thing I can do here is insert an object. So if I'm creating a new case or creating a new account or creating a new user, I could do those things with the insert object action. And then finally, update object. So if I have an object already, let's say it's a case that I need to reassign to someone else, I could do that by using the update object action. And I'd have to have the object's ID. So that would be like a combination of me using execute SOQL to pull back the matching objects that match my, whatever criteria that is. Maybe it's, I have some object ID for some other object, right, the case, but I need to get the object ID for the user. I could pull those different values back. I could then do the update object and provide the values to update, and those are provided in a dictionary, as we'll see here in a second. So my first command there is just going to return to me my authentication token. It's being displayed here just so that you can see that it actually worked. And this will help you to kind of validate that, yeah, this authentication worked. The connected app that I set up is working correctly as well. The next command that this is just a sample bot. So you could customize this, or you could, totally blow this away and just build your own bot. But the next thing it's doing here is inserting an object. Now, when we're inserting an object, we're creating an object, right? And so the way that we're doing that from the Automation Anywhere side is we're creating a dictionary, right? So I have this dictionary that I set as D new case. So this is just a sample dictionary that I'm creating. I'm setting some values for that dictionary, right? And again, think of a dictionary, it's just key value pairs, right? Lots of key value pairs that I'm storing. So I have a key that I'm creating that I'm calling priority, and that's going to be assigned to whatever my value is here, which is my S high priority value. By default, that's been set here, right here. So this is set to high, right? So what I'm doing is assigning, right, that key value relationship in my dictionary for D new case. And I'm doing that over and over again, right? I'm doing that for the case priority. I'm doing that for the case subject. I'm doing that for the case description. And I'm doing that for the case status, right? Now, these keys are really important. These keys are tied to the values that exist for the particular object that I'm going to be inserting, right? So a case has different object values than does a user, or does a location, or some custom object that you've created in Salesforce. We can see these by going to the workbench. So I think I included a link to that here. Yeah, right here. So in the documentation, in the SOQL query to execute section, I've got the workbench set up. So I'm going to click that. Should open in a new link. I'm going to log in real quick just so we can see this. I think this will work. Okay, so this is their Query Explorer. And this is what I use when I'm doing any kind of bots that use Salesforce. And I can come down here and see all of these different objects. So I can see case, right? Because case is what we're looking at. These are all the different fields or the different properties that a case has, right? And so if we've got these that have an underscore, double underscore, and then C, we know that's a custom field. We've got some that are, just the standard fields. And I can come through here and I can, grab a bunch of these. Let's just grab all those and hit query. And I can see all of the cases in my system, and I can see how those values are set, right? So this can give me kind of a clue as to what I'm going to be doing when I'm actually creating my, my packages. So let's go back here. So I've got my dictionary created, right? I'm going to be doing an insert, Okay, so I've got my insert object action, I've got my object type, which is my case, and I've got my D new case, which is my dictionary, and that response is going to come back to me as S inserted object ID. If it's a success, I should see that. If it's some kind of other error, I'll want to see that as well so that I can understand what happened, right? Maybe I tried to use some properties that don't actually exist for that object, and I tried to map to that and it didn't work. Or I'm missing some properties that are required for that particular object. So I'd want to make sure that I understand the different objects that I'm using and understand how I can insert them. So here for the sample bot, we're just going to be displaying what comes back as a result of this insert object request. And it should just be our object ID of the newly created object. If it's not, we should see that in the error message, and that will show up here as well. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to execute SOQL. And again, this is that query language, and we can see that here in that workbench, right? I can come here and I can, build out any kind of queries I want, and it could be based off of date, or it could be based off of all these other values. I can filter, right? So I can filter if the count ID is equal to something, right? I can build it out here, or I can type it if I'm more comfortable with typing out in SOQL. It's, again, very similar to SQL, but come here and practice and play with those here before you start to enter them on the A2019 side. But here I've got the execute SOQL. So I've got my SOQL query. It's pretty much the same thing that we just inserted, right? So I'm trying to grab the case number, the priority, the contact email, the description, and the ID from case, right, which is the type where my ID is equal to, and this is where I'm using that inserted object ID. So whatever came back here, right, my inserted object ID, that's what I'm using for my SOQL query, right? So I'm saying, hey, show me all these details related to this specific object ID. All right, so that will return to me a JSON result, right? So that's going to return to me basically just a JSON, which again has very similar structure to a dictionary, but it's the key value pairs. It just might go several layers deep. But it's going to return to me all of the data from my SOQL query so that I can review that, right? And if I wanted to make use of it and parse through it and things like that, I could do that. I'd probably have to use something like the JSON Object Manager that's also available on BotStore. But I could make some sense of that. For our example here, we're just going to be displaying that. We're then going to use the update object action. So here, again, very similar to what we had before, we're going to be building out a dictionary. But this time, as a part of our dictionary, we're just including the keys and the values that we want to update. So here, I'm updating the subject, right? And we're going to have a new subject for our case. Here, we're going to be updating the description. So we'll have a new description for our case. And we'll look at Salesforce so that we can actually see these things. All right, so then we're running the update object. So again, my type is the case, right? So I'm updating a case in this example. It could be any type of object, so you'll have to fill that in. I've got my inserted object ID. So again, because I'm doing an update, I have to say what the ID is of the object that I actually want to update. And then I give the dictionary for that, right? And that's the dictionary to say what values specifically do you want to update. And we've got that set there. My response is going to come back as the updated object response. I should get an object updated successfully message coming back. If I get something else, if I get something that has the word error in it or exception, I should check for that and make sure. Here, we're just going to be displaying that so that we can see that the update occurred successfully. We're doing another execute SOQL right after that. We're going to try and read those values, right? So we inserted, we did a read to validate that the insert worked. We're doing an update, and then we're going to do another read, and that read is going to allow us to see that those values were updated. So again, I'm just pulling back in this case, the subject, description, and ID from case, where the case ID is equal to my inserted object ID that we started with. And again, we're going to be displaying those results as a JSON. The last thing we're going to be doing is deleting the object. And so this is where we're using the Salesforce delete object action. We've got the type. Again, I have to give that. So I have to tell Automation Anywhere and subsequently this package, what type of object I want to delete. And so here I'm specifying a case. It could be a user, it could be an opportunity, it could be a location, whatever custom or default objects that you're working with. I would give the object ID. Again, we have to tell it exactly what object to delete. So we have to give that object ID there. And again, it's going to return to me a message that should be success on a success, or it will be the body of the error message on a failure. Here I'm displaying that just so I can see it. So let's go ahead and run this so we can see exactly how it works. Hopefully that breakdown helped. I'm also going to open up Salesforce because we want to see this on the Salesforce side, exactly how it's working. So let me log in here. Got too many Salesforce accounts. Oh no. There we go. All right, and I'm going to go back here. Okay, so this is my Salesforce environment. Now again, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. You don't have to have a paid Salesforce account to play with this package or to be able to test it out. I'm using a Salesforce dev account. I don't have any special access to Salesforce because I work at Automation Anywhere. This is just a regular dev account that anyone could sign up for free. So I'm going to go to cases because that's what we're going to be creating. These are just like some default cases that are recently viewed. I'm going to go to, let's see, all open cases. And I haven't done anything yet, right? So we're just going to see what happens here. Let's go back to my Automation Anywhere. Okay, I've set up all of my credentials into the authenticate step. So let's go ahead and run this and we'll see what happens. And again, we should be seeing those pop-ups come up that tell us like, hey, what is your token? And hey, this is the object ID for the object we just inserted. So I should see all that stuff popping up just to let me know exactly what's working. But I might want to follow some of these steps with like a conditional statement afterwards if I'm using them like in a real production environment, because I really don't need to display them on a screen. Okay, so that's starting to execute now. And again, we should see those pop-up messages showing up. And again, going back to kind of what we said in the intro, the big benefit here is that using this, I can go a lot more quickly than I would otherwise, right? If I had to try to do object cloning or recording, so there's my auth token. If I had to do that on top of the Salesforce Lightning interface, that can be really challenging to work with. But with this, I can be sure that it's exactly precise every time. So there's my object ID for the insert. This is the response, right? So the insert worked correctly. This is the JSON that came back. And I know this, if you're not totally familiar with JSON, this might look like kind of hieroglyphics there. But notice that we've got my attributes, and inside of that, I've got my type is my case. I have a URL to that specific object. I've got my case number. I've got my case priority, which was one of the values that we set, right? We set it to high. I've got a contact email as null because I didn't set that. I've got a description, which I did set, and we can see here that I've got my full case description. And then I have my object ID, and this was the ID of the object that we inserted. If I come back here on Salesforce, I'm going to leave that window just kind of over here for a second while we bring this up. So on the Salesforce side, I should see that this object was created. So here we see one, it says new case for processing. I'm going to click on that. Notice at the top here in my URL, I've got my, this is technically my ID. So notice that this matches the ID that I've highlighted down here, right? It ends in AAL. Over here on the right, it was created by Micah Smith because that's the user that I gave for that authentication. I have my case description. I have my case subject, and I have my case priority, which were the values that we set. So that's working. I'm going to hit close here. Okay, so it says the object was updated successfully. So it's going to do again that query. Here it's showing me the new values, right? So I have my description has changed to say the word updated in it. My subject also has the word updated in it, right? So here's my old subject. Let's go ahead and refresh this. We should see that the object was updated. So here it says this is the subject for the bot, which is updated. This is the updated description. We didn't do anything with priority, so that's still high. Okay, so we know that our update worked correctly, right? Because we got this JSON as a result, but we also can see that on the Salesforce Lightning UI side. Let me hit close here. And then finally, we did that delete, right? And we have a confirmation of that delete through our object ID. If I refresh this, we'll probably get an error. Let's see. Yeah, so there was a problem. It's because that object doesn't exist anymore. We deleted it. So if I go back here to view all open cases, we'll see that that one doesn't exist anymore. And so that way we know that our execution has worked. Cool. So that worked okay. So just as a recap, again, this is really helpful if you're starting to use Automation Anywhere and you want to use that together with Salesforce. This is a really effective way to do that. It's a lot easier than trying to do, recorder actions on top of the Salesforce UI. That's not to say you can't try it that way, but this is much quicker, and it gives me a confirmation every single time that I know something worked or I know that an action took place. So I would strongly encourage you to check that out. Check out this and other bots on botstore.automationanywhere.com. Hopefully this helps you to build more quickly. Hopefully this helps you to build more advanced bots. My name is Micah Smith. Go be great.